Hey everybody, and welcome back to another tier list video, or unit ranking, unit tiering video, whatever you want to call it. Infantry part 4, I believe. Before we go into it, first, once again, a tiny bit of housekeeping. I slightly changed the denominations. Is it denominations, markings, whatever you want to call it, of units, if there's a caveat to it, such as, them only being that high, or being that high mainly because of the transports, and which before I denoted with a star. Now I changed it to a red font, blue font, in case that despite it being so strong, you still never really see it because it overlaps with other units in a certain relatively niche role. And then if both are the case, then I change it to purple, like for example Gavnuni. And I think that's really all that has to be said about this. Last time we went over the Motostrelki, I slightly changed the, you may see it if I do this. Yeah, now you can see my mouse pointer. I slightly changed the window of the thing, so at least if I keep it on the top, you sometimes still see the unit card, which I think for infantry isn't as important, but I think for some artillery pieces or some more obscure units can be helpful at times. I just hope I keep it mostly at the top, whatever unit I'm talking about. But yeah, last time we went with Motostrelki 90 in the B tier, which I think is adequate. And yeah, I think we can now jump into Motostrelki. Oh, and of course I fixed some typos and whatnot that I had in the file that were mentioned in the comments. And that's all there is to say, I think, so let's go on. Motostrelki. This is a very interesting unit and quite a conundrum we're in. S tier for sure not. A tier probably not as well. D tier, they're definitely not D tier. They have some decent transports, they have the BMP-1D. Let me do this. BMP-1D here. And the BMP-2 OBR 1986 is also very solid. But even when you spam them in the 5-pointer, which isn't particularly amazing, there's a certain role for them, even if they don't do the same thing. Or like if they don't, even though they don't do it as well as, let's say, rifleman spam, they still can be useful in that role. And when it comes to ignoring the transports, they're pretty good line infantry because, I mean, they get a standard assault rifle, standard MG, that's fine. But RPG 7 for 10 points on top of that is actually a pretty good deal. When you compare them, that riflemen have the same primary and MG, but they just get the basic claw, and I would always consider, or I also always take the RPG 7 over the base law. That is actually really, really good. Like 700 meter range with acceptable accuracy in AP, given the price, is nothing to, I'm sorry for that, nothing that you should ignore. Or look over, I should say. And like I said, the OBR 1986 is solid. It's kind of interesting, these type of ADGM vehicles, for a while, nobody who was actually tryharding really used them outside of like the BMP-3, which we'll get to in a second. Mainly because of smoke, and then nowadays they came kind of back. They're certainly not like top tier or something, but they became kind of relevant again. I think with the advent of mediums just over the past 2 or 3 years, just becoming a lot more, I wouldn't say viable, but people started using them a lot more. Like super heavies are fine, but like 4 years ago or something, and I was kind of in that camp as well. People would often say, "Oh, if you don't have a super heavy in your 1 vs 1 deck and you're not playing mech or moto, then your deck is garbage." To massively exaggerate it a bit. And of course, against super heavies, the 23AP missiles weren't that useful. But with mediums being more and more used, and 23AP also two-shotting 84As and M1 Wilks, like 15 armor and below, it's pretty decent. Good autocannon, 4 armor to defend against other IFVs as well. So that's not too shabby. BMP-1D, also very, very solid. Oops, that's wrong on this one here. Just overshadowed by the fact that the B tier T exists. So I think they're still very much B tier. And while they have great transport options, I think the BMP-1D or the OBR 1896, as good as they are, don't like make them jump from D to B tier. You know? Even without those transports, they would probably still be C tier. Because you have to keep in mind that when it comes to ignoring the transports, they're actually one of the better line infantry squads. Motostrelki 90, I think they're in a similar camp. Generally, you only rely on them for the AT weapon if you're playing armored or God help you, Soviet mech. In which case, those are really the only good AT options. When with good, I mean only high AT options. Or high AP, I should say. You don't want to rely on them, even less so than Motostrelki 90, because of course, being being in low veterancy and all that, more easily stunned and killed and whatnot. They of course have the BTR 80A and have the BTR 90, and as well as the BMP3. Though as good as those transports are, Motostrelki 90 are also like 15 points, and they don't work too well in conjunction with the BTR 80A or BTR 90, because at that point they're already 20 and 30 points respectively. Your infantry is 15 and not 10 points. So spamming them isn't really quite an option as, let's say, KT spam with the Jäkäri is. You know, is 25 points, and this is at like 35 points for something that, in certain situations, is even worse than a KT. In others, it's better, right? Medium optics, more ammo, 2 front and 2 side can of course in some situations be significantly more helpful than the significantly stronger Bushmaster 2. While also having low armor, less ammo, and no medium optics, right? But it's not like, it's more like a side grade in a sense, combination wise, like BTR 80A and Motostrelki 90, ignoring the price. So it's, yeah, still viable, of course, to use, but it doesn't have the same power as like KT spam with the Jäkäri. And of course, it's the BMP3, which these days isn't really used that much anymore. Mainly like maybe red, even in red mechanized, which was one of the decks where it was in the past nearly always used. It's not really used as much these days, because I think very often you see people using the T72B or mixed mech T72M1M for ATGM purposes, or just Konkurs-M spam with the BMP2. It's still, of course, again, viable. It's certainly not a useless unit by any means. However, I think it's like quote-unquote past its prime. It's viable, it's fine. But I think all of this doesn't really alleviate. I wrote Motostrelci instead of Motostrelki. Holy moly. Motostrelki and Motostrelki 90. I think they more or less do a similar thing. Just, you know, they fill the same role but fulfill it slightly differently. Both are just means to get certain transports for the most part, outside of spamming base ones in the MTLBV or spamming 90 ones in the MTLBV if you're playing mech or armored. The Czech counterpart is better. I would say they're A tier. They're far from S. I mean, you could argue they're high A tier or high B tier or low A tier. They have an OT62A, which is 2 front armor, but only one side, and not a 50 cal, like, let's say, a B tier, normal B tier 50, right? I think the OT62A is like a modified B tier 50 with a better engine or something, and a different different MG. The Viagra 2 is solid. The main issue with the Viagra 2 is you get an availability penalty. You get only 16 Motostrelki per card instead of 20, which is pretty sad because the Viagra 2 isn't like better than, let's say, a KAFV25, which doesn't give you an availability penalty. And this is especially in Eastern Bloc that actually hurts a not insignificant deal, because 16 versus 20 is certainly noticeable, and you don't get an availability boost anymore in Eastern Bloc. So it's not like you still would get 18 with a boost or something. So that for Eastern Bloc specifically hurts quite a big deal. The other, of course, you still get basically the same transport as the Motostrelci and Motostrelki, but I think overall they're do it's more basically the same thing as Motostrelki, just a bit better. You know, they have better 5-pointer, they have a cheap autocannon transport as well as the same PvP. They don't have a BMP 1D, unfortunately, and they get an RPG 75 instead of a RPG 7, which I would still go for the RPG 7, but the 75 is still significantly better than the M72 Law, with better accuracy and more AP, and probably also higher suppression if I had to guess. I'll still put them in A tier though. But you could also put them in like B tier, like consider them high B tier. I think if there weren't so many goddamn units in the game, I would have considered maybe like ordering the tier as well, so that, you know, the first unit appearing in the S tier is the best of S tier and the last one is, but you get the point. MRAAW, yeah, I don't think we need to go over this. Same as MAAW, same as Deckungsgruppe, but unlike Deckungsgruppe, they don't get a good transport, or like, you know, a transport that significantly improves their power. Natres, they are better than Heimatschützen by a big deal. Why? For one, they get mainly they get a good, amazing 5-pointer, 3 front armor, 2 side armor, fast, and 50 cal for the same price, right? Again, the infantry itself, sure, ideally you want a battle rifle or something with high accuracy, so that at least while you're fighting the first burst, you actually have a chance of hitting, because after that you're gonna be panicked anyway and won't hit for shit, no matter what weapon you have. The AT weapon is mostly irrelevant, although in some scenarios, you know, like the Heimatschützen having the blinde sight can be nice, because it has decent accuracy. But it's really the transport that is the biggest deal, because the infantry doesn't really matter what weapons they have. Most of the time their weapons are irrelevant, and as such, they die just as fast as any other 10 HP reservist squad. So the big deal breaker between reservists are the transports. And when you compare this with an M13G, which has 1 front, 1 side, and a much worse MG, that makes a huge difference. Against autocannons, you're going to survive much longer. Against many tanks, you're going to survive a second shot, not just one. Against infantry, especially like spam infantry, cheap spam infantry like riflemen, you're going to survive 1 more shot. And you have a higher damage output against infantry. So that is a massive, massive difference. And as such, A tier. You could argue to give them the, you know, to note that make them blue, to note that the main reason why you don't see them very often is, in fact, grenadiers, often filling the same role for being spammed and just meat shielding. But I don't think that's necessary, because I think you still see Natres a reasonable amount of times. But of course, grenadiers in a 5-pointer do a same role, a bit worse, of course. I mean, the role of just meat shielding worse, because they're more expensive for the same HP and the same transport. But they just do a tad more, and that's why people often use them. But Natres, especially in armor decks or Dutch German mech decks, I would also think certainly are being used. Niebieskie Berety, they're basically the same as Morskaya Piechota. I think even the 90s are also the same. Although they have do they have which RPK? They have the basic RPK, so it's a worse MG. I believe the RPK 74 of the 90s are better, whereas base Morskaya have also the RPK 74. As you can see, they also have the RK29, which is actually very nice. They have the MI17, which is more or less equal in a sense. You know, it's less expensive, but also has fewer rockets, but also like stronger rockets. So yeah, I mean, they're not amazing, but you know, it's still like a 15 HP shock squad that is not utterly useless in an MI17. So in that sense, certainly useful. Niebieskie Berety 90, kind of similar to Morskaya Piechota 90. However, the fact that they don't come in like a wheel transport or like a good ground transport, and again just the MI17 and like an okay 5-pointer, makes them awkward as well, because Morskaya Piechota 90 like a BTR 80A or BTR 90, certainly nice combination. The fact that you don't get that here is really their downfall. So I think they're also just C tier. I hope I didn't. Niebieskie. I don't even know what's supposed to be pronounced like. Let's go on. Norrlandsjägare. Norrlandsjägare are very, very solid, to put it mildly. 15 HP for 25 points. They have a battle rifle, which is great. A standard MG, which is but they have a 1575 meter range recoilless rifle. They're like a Piechota, right? They're just defensive powerhouses against, and then that 1500 meter range especially is so strong. Then you get them in a 5-point fast wheeled transport. It's not just a 5-point Jeep, it's like a 100 km off-road Jeep, right? Unlike the, let's say, Jupiters or M35s. So that is basically just as fast as an XA, which other 5-point Jeeps basically don't are, and why they have the same road speed. As soon as they go just a second off-road, they're just so slow. This one isn't, and this is just for 30 points, getting a fast shock squad. Sure, the transport can't fight, but since you don't spam them, and use them usually like in maybe 2 stacks, rarely 3, but usually on their own in like single buildings here and there, or in 2 stacks, so you don't really spam them. That is so good. And even if you use them in the XA, which is also perfectly fine, they're just so strong defensively. Yeah, so hard to get rid of. If your deck depends on like a ground-based light IFVs or something for fire support and attacking towns, that can be so strong. I think it's really all there has to be said about them. Certainly A tier for me. Despite having like no, except for the TGB, which is great and all. Outside of that, having like just basic transports, and still they're just very, very strong. Once again, similarly to Natres, you don't see them that often, but I think that's just mainly due to how overloaded the infantry type of Scandinavia is, and that usually, since you already have Housekeeping and 90, you often skip them because they kind of fulfill the same role, but you also just need you want so many other things as well in the infantry type that's just hard to fit both in. Nostoväki, they're just a meme. I don't even know. Like, they're militia with 5 HP at 10 points. They have this Lati with 1 HE, but like, no, I mean, I refuse to give them anything better than E tier. They're fun and memey in a sense, but there's a reason why even in meme decks nobody ever uses them. Padobranci, I think in the past I would have given them a better rating, but now, or I mean not now, but one of the last patches that Wargame got, this got changed to an assault rifle. It used to have SMG sets, which doesn't really make sense, I guess, given that this is an assault rifle, right? This is, I think, based on the, or maybe quite literally STG 44s or something like that, like a German World War II rifle, right? Is that what it was called? Let me Google it. STG 44. Yeah, I'm not that stupid. They're, I mean, for 30 points, they're much better. What are they called? Delta Force. They have an assault rifle, not an SMG, but they have an MG3. One of the 2 only units on Red 4 to have the MG3, or technically it's an MG42, but stat-wise it's an MG3. Eric F1. I mean, they're okay, but I think they're... The thing is, why you never see them? For one, if you want special forces in the infantry tab, you obviously use Padobranci 90, which we'll get to in a second. If you want something just for sneaking around and think that Padobranci are too valuable to do that, then you use Specialni Jednotki. That's it. On their own, they're still okay. They're not completely useless. There's just really no reason to use them in Entente or Yugoslavia unless you're playing like a 1980s deck. And that's also the reason why we never see them. But again, in a vacuum, if you take those out, they'd be okay. Padobranci 90. I hope I don't need to explain this too much. but they are certainly S tier. Why? Because they're an Erics with 1 more AP. Yeah. The Erics, of course, has 25 AP. Let's just... There we go, 25 AP. But the Padobranci 90 get just 1 additional AP. They still only have a basic MG, but they have a carbine, which is good, or carbine, whatever you want to call it. Transports that have 71 is fine, it's not great, but given that it's a late KBVT and you get this on veteran, the KBVT itself is not completely useless by any means. Only 1 front armor, unfortunately, because it's like a BTR 60 or something with like a different turret or whatever, I don't know. HG40, you only really use this if you get it, if you play mech and get this Padobranci 90 squad. But I think given how bad the HD40 is, the fact that you still always see them being used in on-taunt mech nonetheless speaks volumes about them. If someone takes this garbage transport just to buy a 35-point squad, then I think that speaks volumes about how good the squad is. Also, what is this? Do you see the scope on the... hold up. Let me briefly... See the scope on this PKM? Is the M84... The M84 is just a PKM, right? Did they actually... I'm actually curious. Yeah, the Motostrelki don't have this. Huh. So they actually went out of the way just to put that freaking scope on there. Sometimes Eugen surprises me in regards to what they pay attention to and what they don't, and what they just completely ignore. But that's none of my business. Wargame player base. Alright. Fagot again. Oh yeah, also sorry, what I forgot to mention, of course, that 1 extra AP, you know, if you deal damage to super heavies or heavy tanks, especially like against 22 armor, 25 versus 26, of course, is quite a big difference, you know. I think now you would 4-shot instead of 5-shot, and you know, in general against super heavies, a bit of chip damage, you know, especially if you're at close range, certainly quite impactful if you attack tanks at close, not point blank, but like pretty close range with like M84As, and you do like 3-4 damage per shot. Then having 26 instead of 25 AP on the Padobranci is certainly quite a big deal. So don't ignore that 1 extra AP, or just disregard it. Of course, coming on elite, that means they recover from being stunned much more quickly. They have higher base accuracy due to the higher veterancy, etc. They're not faster than Nietzsche 90 and Housekeeping actually, because they're light infantry. But yeah, anyway, Fagot, I think same as before. Did I put him in the B tier, right? I mean, I have Milan 1 in here, the base Milan 1, so yeah. Again, they have no like particularly great transports, so yeah. Next up, Konkurs. I think the same. Where did I put the... Did I put any Konkurs in there already? Or are those the first Konkurs squads? I have no Konkurs squad rated already. Okay. The Konkurs squads, the main advantage they have over, like, let's say, Milans, etc., is of course the range. Same with the Konkurs-M. Just like the Fagots, they of course don't have like any notable transports to speak of. You know, all the helicopters, they have like garbage rocket pods. But in the end, they're still okay AT-GM squads. I think you would, if I had to choose between a Konkurs and Fagot, I would probably always use Fagot. But, you know, even if that's your only AT-GM squad available, it'd still be fine. Not amazing, but like, fine. For 20 points, maybe a tad disappointing, but in the end, any halfway consistent AT-GM squad with more than 2,400 meter range, it's still worth using. It's not gonna like, how to put it, like suddenly wreck all your opponents, but it's fine. Milan, again, same thing with the other. Hold up. I have to. This is why I actually left a bit space at the bottom here in this area, because I'll have to do this now. The beat here is becoming too thick. All right, Milan 1. I think. Again, no. I mean, the Fuchs Milan is nice, but nothing again that completely changes the way you play with this unit. And I think the same with the Milan too. The Milan of Fuchs Milan is of course is a decent transport, but that works both well with the Milan 2 as well as the Milan 1. But again, it's not like suddenly a completely different unit. Pancerovnici. I think they're kind of similar like Deckungsgruppe on their own. You know, they're actually even worse than the Carl Gustav M2 squads because of 17 AP versus 18. But just like Deckungsgruppe, they have some solid transport options. They have the Weiter 2, which isn't quite as good as the Marder 1. Although it has somewhat better, also kind of depending on what you need it for. I think for close range fire support against infantry, the Marder 1 is probably better. Ignore the auto cannon, not ignore the armor for now, because Marder 1 with 4 armor of course is nearly always better. But I think if you're looking at like medium to near maximum range fire support against infantry, that autocannon would be better of the Weiter 2. But in general, still good. Again, 15-point transport. We went over that with the Motostrelki. You also can spam them with the MI17 to get them the cheap MI17. You get the BVP, that transport again. So a lot of good options. And especially with the MI17 coming with the 10 point squad, that is not to be ignored. And that's why they're actually going to be in the A tier as opposed to the B tier like Deckungsgruppe. However, of course, because they're even 1 tier higher, because without the transports or like with just basic transports, it would probably be in the D tier. It's going to be red. I always do this. I always accidentally text color. There we go. Make the whole background red. Pansarskytte. The thing with 15-point light infantry squads is if you ignore the transports for now, to buy 15.8 line infantry squad, there has to be something special about it, such as the Law 80 when it comes to Fusilier 90s. And that special thing has to be also like worth being special, right? Diggers 90 with their mini-me, it's nice and all, but honestly still not that great. Pansarskytte they have a better AT weapon, like a significantly better AT weapon compared to 10 point squads. Is it worth paying 5 points for on its own? No. Certainly Pansarskytte themselves would be too good at 10 points. But the 15 points for Carl Gustav M2 and just basic battle rifle and basic MG, not very good. However, of course, they get one great thing, and that is the STRF 9040. And that's a good combination. In fact, sometimes you do see Pansarskytte 90, which are constant the same but are just basically better, to get a cheap STRF 9040, or as cheap as possible the STRF 9040 plus a 10 HP squad. Mainly you see it in Blue Mech if you see it, because in Scandi, if you want a cheap STRF 9040, instead you would just go for a CV90, which is basically better in nearly every scenario. And comes with more infantry to choose from. Maybe more line more 10 HP infantry to choose from. Doesn't make this, like, the combination here is fine. And for most scenarios, Pansarskytte and Pansarskytte 90 are basically interchangeable. But again, Pansarskytte 90 are just a tad better, because 84 in most scenarios is just going to be more useful than the Carl Gustav. And you also get the XA as a transport. You don't have any 5-pointers to speak of. The cheapest transport is 10-point wheeled transports, amphibial, TGB, or in the 90s version, the XA 180. This transport is basically useless. And this one is also, you don't want to, of course, spam line infantry in such a helicopter. So the SDRF 9040 is fine. It's great. Know where to put them. So I think with just basic transports, I would probably be D tier. However, the SDRF 9040 is of course very nice, and as such, I think both of them, once again, B tier. And Pansarskytte 90, both getting the red treatment though. I'm not gonna make them purple because again, sometimes you still see them. I guess I can make these purple since Pansarskytte 90 are basically always used over Pansarskytte 90. Pansarskytte 90 are always used over base Pansarskytte. So yeah. Panzerjäkäri. They're actually solid shock squads. They have an above average MG. Not as good as a MG3 or Mini-Me, but still pretty good. For 20 points, they have a good AT weapon with a good AP, and the OK accuracy, just the range is pretty lacking. But you're still 20 points, which is honestly pretty good. You get a 10 points BMP1, which is actually a not too horrible spam. Not as good as like BTR 550 and Yakari or KT and Yakari, for example. But it's still decent. But if you want like affordable shock squads are decent against infantry and acceptable against vehicles, at least in forests, that's an option in Baltic. You also get a BMP2, which is very, very good for 20 points. Get a KT, of course, although you would not use these squads with the KT most likely. They're solid. It's just, again, you just don't see them because Yakari 90 and Panzerjäger 90 exist. So that's why nobody ever uses them. I actually did use them a bit every now and then to spam like BMP once, and again with the fact that you 5th infantry slot and Baltic front is basically whatever you want to put in there. This is an option, but again you just never see it because there's just so many other options for what you can put in there. But it doesn't really make them bad. Panzerjäger 90, I think it's clear they're A tier, they're strong. They themselves are strong. Their transports are strong. They're not OP by any means, right? Ignoring the transports, they're basically worse Rima 85. But they have, of course, you know, KT, BMP2, BMP1, or BTR 50, which isn't a great 5-pointer, but it's a 5-pointer. So a lot of things to choose from. Solid infantry squad. Not much more you can ask for. Panzergren's base. They're interesting. They are a tad too weak to spam in a 5-pointer. Or to like be a great card to spam in a 5-pointer. And with tad too weak, I mean, they're tad too weak in the AT department, and the 5-pointer is also tad too weak. If the 5-pointer was above average, or if their AT weapon was above average, i.e. Stormer clones, Stormer clones or Lift Garden clones, spamming them in a 5-pointer would be very, very solid. Not as good as Stormer, or Lift Garden rather, because a 5-pointer only has 1 armor in the basic MG, as opposed to 2 armor, or in the when it comes to Norway, at least a 50k. Still, of course, would be solid. Doesn't mean they're bad to spam in a 5-pointer, don't get me wrong. I did actually use that for a while. Maybe I still have it in my Eurocard, like 1 card of them, mainly for like town fighting and such, because as good as Legion 90 are, they're 40 points a pump, and they're sometimes too valuable to sacrifice in towns. So that's still a solid option. It's not amazing, but solid. In mech deck specifically, I think getting them like with Marder 1 is kind of nice on like high veterancy. You can get them in the Marder 2, although you mainly just get Panzergren's 90. They're still very solid. Marder 1 line is solid. Outside of mech, you don't really see much more out of the Marder 1 and Marder 2. In mech, of course, the other ones are also a good option most of the times. Of course, Mother 1A2 over Mother 1A1 basically all the time. Also, you can see, hold on, let me briefly show this. Just have to flex, even though it's not even my work. This is huge in quality of skin. And this is community quality of skin. Vanilla mod. Vanilla mod. This is also modded. Just look at this, man. It looks so sick. Anyway. So I think B tier. Again, I think you only really see them in mech. And in other decks, they're just not used because Panzergrenadiere 90 exist. If Panzergrenadiere 90 wouldn't be this thing, you'd probably still see them every now and then in the other two, or maybe in a 5-pointer or something. Because Shock Squad, MG3, and Battle Rifle is still just very, very strong. Even if your AT weapon is not quite enough against many things, given the price range of your infantry squad. I'm just thinking. I think we can leave them here in B tier. Panzergrens 90. I don't think they're S tier worthy. Maybe. Yeah, no, I don't think they are. As good as the Marder 2 is. I mean, the Marder 2 itself in the vehicle type, maybe I'll put in the S tier. Panzergrens 90 themselves, I don't think I will. Although I guess, would that be a contradiction? If I put the Marder 2 in S tier and the Panzergrens 90 not? So I guess once I rank transport vehicles, maybe I have to do a little note that given that you only can get those transports with infantry, sometimes the transports being in S tier doesn't mean that you should always, you know. Anyway, I'll get to that once we get to the transports. Panzergrenadiere 90, they're great, they're amazing, very good AT weapon. Battle Rifle MG3, nearly the best you could get in those slots. Good transport options, you can get them cheap in a 5-pointer, you can get them in a Marder 2 or Marder 1 if you want something in between. But I don't think they're S tier anymore. And as good as the Marder 2 is, I think it is not always 100% needed, or rather, while I would put it in personally in basically any deck that you can put it in, I think you can also be fine by not using it. Eurocore doesn't quite need it because if MX tends to do with like light vehicles everywhere, you know. In Dutch Germany you can also get away with like the AMX 13s instead. So many decks also have like different options to choose from. I think in Landshut it's probably a must-have, or close to a must-have, I guess. Because while you have M41s, they lack the AP to consistently deal with enemy high armor vehicles or IFVs. I don't think they are S tier anymore. I think if the Panzergrens 90 themselves, and I'm not suggesting that should be the case, right? If anything, them being A tier is maybe a testament to them being strong yet still, I would say, balanced. They in the past they were like ridiculous when base ones were 15 and 90s were 20 points, as well as the MG3 being by far the best MG. That was a whole different time. These days I think they're well balanced. Also I miss the typo there. Yeah, I think it's enough about them. Panzerjäger, again, same like the MRAAW, just very basic fist squad, but no notable transports to speak of, you know. No MI-17 either. Paratroopers base, they have a Lynx H7. So I guess that alone can. But no, I cannot with good conscience put them in C tier. While they do have Lynx H7, which is great. Not only compared to base, like, hold up. I put base commandos in the D tier, yes? I just wanna just briefly remember this. They have a battle rifle, which is great on shocks, and a Bran L4, which is one if not the worst MG you could have. Now let's go over to the Paratroopers 90, Paratroopers base. I also have the L4, they also have the Galgos FM2, but I have an SMG. An SMG on shock squads is, it's not as, and I hate to use the word because I actually really hate the word, it's not as cringe as, sorry, it's not as cringe as SMGs on line squads, but it's still not very nice, honestly. And maybe this is, I mean, the list is completely biased because I'm doing it on my own, on my experience, and not just, you know, what I see, not just pure values, in which case you could just, I guess, in theory, if you wanted to, do some sort of massively convoluted formula if you wanted to. But anyway, I just, no, I cannot with good conscience give them a C tier, because then people might get the might even, like, they just use Pansarskytte instead if you had the choice. They at least get a, like, sure, the line, and they will have worse DPS, but they have pound for pound, they'd be just better choice. Paratroopers base are just, bruh, no. Paratroopers 90, I mean, they're in a vacuum, or like not in a vacuum, but let's briefly remember Panzer. Like, I'm just gonna go like back and forth between them, right? So you can see those differences better visualized. Paratroopers 90 have a better MG. They both have an assault rifle. Paratroopers 90 get 10% more accuracy and lose 1 AP as well as suppression, but mostly lose 1 AP for 10% more accuracy, as well as have a better MG. So on paper, they are more or less equal in a certain sense, ignoring the transports, as Panzerjäger 90. And they do have the Lynx H7, which is a great transport. But the Law 80 is just so underwhelming very often. Again, on like usually in the 90s, and maybe I should have put them in the A tier. Someone was just recently commenting on that, maybe, who knows. But something about the Law 80 on like shock and upwards is just rubs me the wrong way. And again, this is maybe just anecdotally and just maybe mixed in with feelings of Commonwealth just being bad, but just, I don't know. And then, of course, you know, the ground transports are average at best, and the Lynx H7 is great, but I think the Lynx H7 doesn't automatically elevate them to A tier, because it also massively changes the way you deploy them and you use them. So you can't use them as frontline as well. And I think as such, I'll only put them in the B tier. I hate to say it, but it do be like that. Also, I just noticed I never used the apostrophe for other units, so goodbye. So I'm sorry to say it. Maybe you know, same with the Gurkhas 90. Maybe I'm again a bit underappreciating them or undervaluing them, but the thing with the Law 80 is, if that's like your best AT, it's just not quite good enough. Needing 3 shots instead of 2 versus 15 armor, which is again M84s and M1 Wilks. Needing 5 shots instead of 4 against 19 armor. Needing 4 shots instead of 3 against 18 armor. Those thresholds, not really the biggest of deals, of course, although against Leopard 2 A4 it would be. But as well as but most notably against the Wilk and 84A. It's just, again, maybe it's a bit of bias here, but just rubs me the wrong way. I'm sorry. Piechota Zmech. They themselves are like better than Motostrelki. They have the same 5-pointer, but they have, in my opinion at least, but they have an RPG 7 instead of the 75. They don't get the same BMP2, they only get the base Konkurs 1. They don't get like a cheap autocannon transport. I think this, in the past I've used them, spam them in Eastern Bloc, but they're just not good enough in my opinion anymore. I don't like to do that anymore. So I think they're just C tier. It's still better than just having a basic 5-pointer with 1 armor. And I suppose these BMP2s, even though they're not amazing, they're still okay. But I don't think they're B tier worthy. But also not as bad as D tier, because, you know, again, they're somewhat useful, at least, those BMP2s. And the 5-pointer at least has 2 front armor. So Pioneers, once again, just like assault engineers or something. Nothing. Okay, I mean, granted, they have the TH495. So I suppose, you know what, I suppose it's not a very strong combination by any means, but it's still a 10-man squad with an okay other kind of vehicle. So honestly, I think it kind of puts them in the C tier. And while it's only that due to the TH495, it's not multiple tiers higher due to the TH, so they wouldn't be red. Strela-2, you can't get them in the Vitra too, but honestly, it doesn't really make them any better. To be honest, because they're just so incredibly inconsistent. Actually, that makes them better. That doesn't make them C tier. It makes them D tier. Never mind. It's very inconsistent, but coupled with the Strela, coupled with the Vitra 2, I wouldn't recommend using this as in any deck, but like check armored or something. Although in that case, I would use the Strela 3 and not the 2 one. But I think both of them. Actually, you get the MI17, but the Strela 2, yeah. And Strela 3, genuinely, I wouldn't A tier, not, but I think B tier just for the cheap MI17. Because when you use like Milan 1s or Fagots for cheap MI17s, that's good, because the Milan 1 and the Fagots themselves are actually not useless by any means, right? Oh, did I already have anything with the MI17? No, okay. I was like, they're like they're not useless, but like the Strela 3 is actually useless, but it's still like a 40-point MI17 if you need it, and as such, you know, not too useless. Again, you only really never see it because you usually get like 10-point ATGM squads or something, but in and of itself, in the MI17, it's actually kind of usable. Droogs, they're honestly great. They're like, so I really like, actually, they're one of the best ATGM squads. They're arguably even better than Milan 2 at times, because at 5% accuracy actually is quite useful. You only have 20 AP, but 15 points. I mean, they're obviously quite literally in between Milan 1 and Milan 2, price-wise, or Fagot and Konkurs. But 15 points for a consistent 20 AP, 2400 meter range, 80 gem. That's actually really, really good. And you can even get them like a PvP MADA, which is actually a nice combination, or the Vitra, or a 5-pointer, and like that's a very good ATGM squad. They're not a lot of 15. I don't even know if this might be. Hold on, I'm curious. Is this the only 15-point ATGM squad? There's a drunk or a drug. Yeah, I think unless I'm like blind, this is actually the only 15-point ATGM squad. But they're just really, really good. Genuinely. I think if it only like basic transports, probably B tier, or maybe even still A tier. But it's quickly become one of my favorite ATGM squads, unironically. Fagot, I think once again, the transports, I don't think they're quite putting them into A tier. They're still a solid combination. But yeah, It's not like MS17 tier or something like that. Because you really only use those transports in mech. Because like the higher end PvPs, because those Malyutkas just are not very consistent. And while you can of course shoot them at the same time as the autocannon, if you pay 25 points for it, that isn't as useful anymore, because then you obviously use it against like tanks or heavy IFVs. But with only 3 front armor, if you're doing that at medium to close range, you're just too easily killed. And 1 side armor as well for 25 points means that aim extends will just pop you instantly from the side. So that is a big weakness of those heavier PvPs. At the 15-point PvP, of course, whatever. You know, the autocannon is so good, and being able to get a free Malyutka at the same time is great. But if you pay 20 or 25 points and still have only 1 side armor, and even 3 front armor at 25 points, it's still a solid IFV. Don't get me wrong. I don't think it should be like more cheap or anything. But the side armor can actually be quite a liability at times. There we have the first Fagot with an MS17. Just like Milan F1. I think that gives it the A tier. I don't think really we need to talk around the bush. It's just, yeah. Konkurs. We had a Konkurs earlier. In the, yeah. I think because it's 20 points and the Konkurs itself is just, again, on the lower end of B tier, I don't think it gives it the A tier. Because at that point, you already pay 50 points for that MS17. And you don't get as many per card. So yeah. Yeah. I don't think I need to talk over the same type of ADGM squads all the time. Grom is amazing. The Grom plus Promet. Promet is like a slightly worse crash head, right? It only gets a PKT and not a quad PKT. It only gets 1 front armor, not 2. Maybe even side armor as well. But it's still, given compared like when used with a manpad, that's not as big of a deal as it would be with scratch heads, because they're much more at the front line. But it's still a very strong combination, and just like Igla-N scratch head, just covers so much airspace. The Promet stuns the helos, the Grom deals the main damage. You know, this is such a cool and strong combination. That's really, it's really just amazing. And definitely A tier. The only reason why you don't see it in Unspec decks is just LSTR. Strela-2 don't even get the MI7. Oh yeah, because of 5 points. They're 5 points. I guess given the fact that they have the Promet, I'll give them the D tier. I'll give them the D. He said it. He said the line. That name. I hope I wrote that properly. Proletary. Recently someone, let me actually briefly check if the person responded. On the last video, someone was mentioning why I rated Mornarichka patch so low, given that I have the same transport as Mechanisovana, which is of course not true. They actually get different transports. I assumed that comment was in German. I assumed the comment meant proletary. Okay, no response to that. I assumed the comment proletary, because proletary do get the same transport options as Mechanisovana, with the BVP line and all that. But they're of course 5 points more expensive. Base proletary are of course 15-point shock squads, the same stats as base Motritzen, of course M72 law instead of the RPG 7. But still 15-point shock squads are great. The main issue is with proletary. The 5-pointer is slow. 45k mage and has only 1 armor, so it's a very easy target to shoot before the infantry unloads. If it was either fast or a 2 front armor, or ideally both, they would be so good for like town fighting, town spamming. I mean, they still are good, but that would massively help, because in that case you obviously want them fast in a town. I'm not suggesting they should have a better 5-pointer, but if. And then if you want to spam them with their IVs or the OTM 60PB, then you more use them a bit more as meat shields as well. But for 15 points, it's kind of acceptable, right? Because it's still affordable. And just... I think they're still S tier. I mean, in the past, I used the Proletariat PvP combo myself, right? That's actually kind of a nice combination, because Proletariat, of course, that way you could like get them to towns, have them as fire support for infantry at the edge, and then move them into the town. And then when they're in the town, you know, being so cheap and shock, they can actually kill infantry quite efficiently. So that's just a nice combination. It's still only 30 points, right? It's just 5 points more. And the PvP, of course, benefits from having a high veterancy, or in the PB. And then, of course, these transports will be able to do with 5 pointers the Proletariat might struggle against. And in MacDeck or something, just a card of those in a 5 pointer is still good, even if it's slow and only 1 armor. It's still good because like 20 points shock squads on elite is baby. You could consider them A tier. And I hope people realize that even though you maybe don't see them that often, the main reason is just because Mechanisovana exists. But are they actually that? I'm not sure, man. Or maybe they are just A tier? I mean, they are very, very good, don't get me wrong, but are they broken tier? The PvP MADA being so strong isn't as big of a deal anymore the more expensive you get, right? Let's for example, well, to be clear here, Proletariat themselves, ignoring the transports, are in my eyes worse Mordschützen because they have a worse AT weapon in nearly all or in many scenarios. And Mordschützen base, while they're strong in a vacuum, they're of course not broken by any means. So Proletariat base without the transports are as a result also not broken. Now the PvP MADA is of course both in the mechanics as well as a balanced way broken, because it really shouldn't fire the ATGM as well as autocannon at the same time. And balance wise is also of course broken because it gets late RH202 for 15 points at 3 front armor and a minute that it can fire at the same time while also being reasonably mobile. Of course there's also the PB, but the PvP is the main offender, I'd say. But here's the thing. Let's consider, let's say, Fallschirmjäger 90. They're in the A tier. Let's consider a 35 point special force squad. Well, no, hold on. Yeah, Komarinier 95. I think they're a better example. Komarinier 95, I think many people would say they're great, but generally not broken or like in need of nerfs. If Komarinier 95 had access to the PvP MADA, would that PvP MADA still be as big of a problem? Not really. It'd still be good for 15 points. It'd still be amazing at 15 points. But similarly to the Marder 1, that is actually too strong at 15 points. The Marder 1 itself is not really that big of an issue, balance-wise, right? Because the infantry it comes with doesn't really allow you to get such crazy value out of the Marder 1. And as such, I don't think that makes Proletariat S tier. They are very, very high A tier. But I don't think they're S tier. Oopsie. Because while the PvP, of course, should get nerfed, Proletariat themselves shouldn't. And Mechanisovana as well themselves shouldn't, because I think for 10 points they're actually fine. Because having the MG3 is kind of outbalanced by the fact that they have an SMG, which is nearly useless, and average AT weapon. So yeah, Proletariat 90. I think they're kind of similar. You know, they're like Panzerjäkäri 90, Panzergrenadiere 90. They're good shock squads, great shock squads. However, Oh, hold on. I have to. Well, I just saw it. Sergio Perez. Sorry to interrupt that for this. Sergio Perez became the Red Bull driver for 2021. Isn't that great? Sorry, someone just messaged me that. Frosinone, of course, like Panzerjäger, they're very similar to them as well. One more AP once again, actually. I don't know if the MG is actually worse or better or same, but probably a tad better. But for what they do, I would say they have slightly worse transports, because being like those 10 HP all-around shock squads that you probably very often call in if you need like AT, then you'd really like something like a KT that one can provide fire support, but also like get them to the front line quickly for relatively cheap, meaning 15 points. While you can get them cheap, or you can get them in a 15-point wheel transport, which is obviously far worse than a KT. They are slightly worse in that regard. They are better in the regard that the transports are great. They're better in the regard that they have one extra AP. So yeah, that is just a trade-off. They are kind of, two sides of the same coin. No, that's not what you would say here. But like, they're like a side grade, in my eyes. In some situations, the Proletariat are better, in others, the Panzerjäger are better. And then, of course, it also depends on what the rest of your deck looks like, right? PSM. My god. Of course, it's just another good manpad. It's the Stinger C with 1 extra step range, actually, but 5 points more as well. But still very good. Faktoriya. You can get them in the MTVs, so I don't think I really need to talk about that. Konkurs. All of those you can also get like in Scratchets or something, which is also a good combination. But yeah, I don't think again, ATGM squads, I don't think I need to talk too long about them. See, now we're getting over like all these squads that we did. I got, of course, 8 here because you get the MS-17 base Konkurs. It's literally the same thing, right? PRS whoop. Oh, spacebar does this. I didn't realize. And yeah, and then of course PTRS Konkurs and PTRS Konkurs-M. Igla. You can also get them in the MTV or Scratchet, and that actually, especially the Scratchet, makes them A tier for sure. That's actually a very strong combination and seen fairly frequently. Putin really likes it. I can very much agree with that. Basically, that allows having those Igla and Scratchet combination means you could basically get away with justice. In my eyes, you probably still don't want to, but you could get away with just a single card of AA in the support tab, honestly. Because that protects you against helos pretty well, as manpads do, and Scratchets as well. Scratchets reasonably, like stunning them. Iglas do, because while they don't have, amazing range against helos like a Gepard, for example, being manpads means they're stealthy, and as such can be very, very close at the front line. And fire is, of course, very often why not even being spotted. So that means that the range disadvantage is kind of counteracted by that. And of course, they're very cheap. And combined with Scratchets, they also have like very good base defense, flank defense, they're affordable, they're consistent, they stun, and then they deal chip damage to planes, and then your main AA can finish them off. So if you wanted to, you could basically run this and your OSA AKM, and that in theory can be enough for your AA net. I would not suggest doing it, but it's possible. Igla-N basically the same. I would still go for the base Igla because you don't really need an extra HE. But if Igla base wasn't an option, I think you would just see Igla-N as well. It's mainly just the price, and most not actually the price, but mainly the availability nerf. Strela-3 you can get in the MTV and the thingy magic. So I guess that still makes them B tier, right? The other Strela-3 also here. Once again, if you want like a very as cheap MTV in Soviets, you would just use the Fagots. Another Konkurs squad. You can get them in the KT and the BMP2, but of course you never see them. Why? Because spikes are a thing, and similarly to spikes, or like in general, like these low availability things, the KT here, as good as it would be, and if you had like 7 cars of them, you probably would. I mean, at least in spikes, you probably would use them in the KT, but the KT being so strong wouldn't be as big of a deal in like those 8 per card squads or something. So yeah. And then of course, I don't think I need to tell you why, but the spike, similarly to the Chumad and the Dorbans, S tier of course. Hey, we got to a thing where we can talk more about than 5 seconds without having to repeat ourselves. RBS 56. Of course, compared to many other ATGM squads, you only have 2,275 meter range. You also have 30 points ignoring the transports. But you have 8 missiles, you have 26 AP, and you're 5 HP. However, you also only have good stealth and not very good stealth. That is basically the trade-off for being 5 HP, and thus, if you have the 5 HP utility squad, same with the Mistral by the way, have worse stealth and more missiles and also cost more. It's basically a trade-off. But I think especially with the RBS 56, I think it's a good trade-off because the RBS 56 just tend to fire naturally, of course, at closer ranges than other ATGM squads, and so they're also, of course, more prone to being spotted. But then again, they're also more prone to being spotted because of their stealth. So what I'm trying to say here is, it's actually very often that they just sit in the building, fire, get spotted and shot at, but still just tank the shot and just should kill or at least hit the enemy tank. But the 26 AP just hits like a truck, of course, right? It's just hope. If that hits, man, the enemy tank it's gonna be either dead or not seen for a different reason. That reason being repaired now, and anything that isn't a tank is just gonna die, of course. They're both viable in the SRF as well as just cheap wheel transport. Yeah, they just play a bit different than other ATGM squads at times. Of course, they also have high base availability, which is honestly pretty great. UW1, so it's another Igla, actually an Igla-N, at least stat-wise. Rannikko-Jääkäri. I don't know what Rannikko means, but Jääkäri obviously means Jäger or hunters or some whatever. Actually, yes, I think that's a good point to stop. We're over 1 hour and we just basically got to a new type of infantry with the Rannikko-Jääkäri and Rannikko-Jääkäri 90s. I think it depends on how far we get. Maybe next one is gonna be the last one on infantry. Let's see. There's still gonna be like a lot of similar squads that we already went over, lots of manpads and such. So maybe we're gonna go over, then we're gonna be done with the next one. Or maybe the next one's gonna be like 1.5 hours if I think I can get it done. We'll see. And this is this episode 4. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about it. Let me know if I mistyped anything anywhere, or if there's inconsistencies. If so, I'll fix it. You know, sometimes I forget what I ranked in the past. You know, like for example, Deckungsgruppe are B tier, while more are D tier, even though they're basically the same squad. So Deckungsgruppe should get a red color, which someone told me or like suggested in the last video, and I was like, yeah, definitely makes sense. My mistake. So let me know if there's something like that as well. And yeah, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll hopefully see you next time.